Good morning, student. I hope you are safe at your homes. Today, we are going to learn about characteristics of growth rings and difference in between sapwoods and heartwood. So, let's start. This diagram shows presence of sapwood, heartwood, many more growth rings, and there is a inner bark, outer bark. While at the right side there is a three different types of surfaces. First surface, that is a radial surface, then second, that is a transverse surface, and then tangential surface. So within this diagram we can see each and everything about a secondary growth or a growth rings. So at the center there is a presence of a pith. So this is the pith, and away from that pith or above the pith there is a presence of a hardwood which is a darker in color, and at the periphery to hardwood there is a presence of a sapwood which is a lighter in shade, while this grey color, brownish to grey color, is nothing but an inner bark and outer bark. So all over this surface there is a presence of light and dark shaded rings. So what is meant by dark shade? Dark shade is nothing but an rings, and that's why we are going to know about what is meant by rings or growth rings. So first of all we know about anatomy and organization of a wood, means how they are constructed within a plant. So first of all, wood is characterized by the presence of axial and radial structure. So what is meant by axial? Axial means at the center of a axis, and radial means at the periphery. So wood is characterized by the presence of axial and radial structures which are derived from the fusiform and ray initials. So ray initials are nothing but a medullary rays initials. So for example, in conifers the cells of the axial system are most frequently, that is nothing but tracheids, so which are designed to form tissues for strength and water conduction. So in case of gymnosperm or conifers, the tracheids are made for the purpose, that is strength and water conduction, while in hardwood the axial system is composed primarily of fibers and vessel elements. So the fibers and vessel elements, then these growth rings possesses two different types of cell that permits a division of a labor. Division of labor means a particular work or function. The fibers serves as a largely mechanical functions, means these fibers giving the mechanical functions or a support, and the vessel elements are wide hollow cells which are specialized for the water conduction. These are the elements of a xylems. Then wood grain is determined by the orientation of the cells of the axial system and is thus a measure of the longitudinal alignment of a tracheids in a softwood or fibers and their predominance. So what happened in radial system? Functions primarily in the transport of carbohydrates from the inner bark to the wood, means within this diagram here is the inner bark and outer bark, and here is the growth ring. So radial system function primarily to the transport of carbohydrates from inner bark to the wood, means the carbohydrate get transferred from inner bark to the wood, and there are some food storage cell in this system as well, and water movement through the ray is possible. So here is the combination, that is storage of a food material as well as water movement, means of water conduction, and this can be possible due to the ray medullary rays. Ray cells interrupt the interconnection of the tracheids or fibers, and hence wood is split or broken or differentiated more easily along the wood rays. Means the ray cells are nothing but a medullary ray cells which can interrupt, which can develop two different locations, that is nothing but an interconnection of tracheids or fibers, and that is a wood which can be spilled more easily along the wood rays. In many species, only the youngest wood carries water and nutrients throughout the plant. Means what? Usually each and every species shows a youngest wood which always carries the water and nutrients throughout the plant body, while, and this is called as a sapwood, while the tree which becomes aged and the older inner portion of the sapwood is get infiltrated by oils, gums, resin, tannin and other chemical compounds. So at that time that cells becomes dye, that cell become dye, and the sapwood has been converted, the sapwood has been get converted into the heartwood, which is often darker in color than sapwood, which is present usually at the center, because at the peripheral region there is a development of newly developed sapwood or annual rings. So this is all about a heartwood and sapwood. So here is the one main difference in between sapwood and heartwood. Sapwood is nothing but such type of rings or growth rings or annual rings which has a particular function, that is conduction of water and food material, and the cells are having presence of a sap which is a viscous fluid, which is a watery fluid, while the heartwood is nothing but a dyed cell. Heartwood is nothing but a dyed cells which get typically persist for the life of the tree and afford structural strength, which gives the structural strength unless diseased, and can serve as a reservoir of water for the sapwood. So this is all about heartwood, and the given diagram shows difference between heartwood and sapwood. So in case of a orange to brownish color part is nothing but a growth rings, while the blue color represent a medullary rays or ray cells, and within that ray cells there is a presence of a radial parenchyma which is having small pits, and that pits are nothing but a wall openings, a small opening which can communicate with adjacent cells, while these orange to brownish color represent a wood and that possesses presence of vessels. So this one larger cells are nothing but vessels, and around that vessel there is a presence of a small pits. Through that pits they can transfer water and minerals, and at each and every end of the vessel there is a presence of a perforation plates which can also participate in a exchange of water and minerals during the conduction, while the Around the vessel there is a presence of a axial parenchyma, and these are the axial tracheids. So these are the axial tracheids and these are the fibers. So most important difference in between tracheids and fibers, that is tracheids having many more pits as compared to the fibers. So these tracheids showing many more pits while these fibers having lesser amount or rare pits on the outer wall. While this is the softwood cells which showing a axial parenchyma, also that axial parenchyma possesses a smaller pits on a outer wall, while these tracheids and fibers, these tracheids showing a presence of circular as well as squared shaped pits on their walls. So this is all about cells which are present in the rings. Then in normal or good growing condition, means a favorable condition, the proportion of a secondary xylem cells formed is much more greater than that of the secondary phloem. Means what? Near about 10 to 20 cells are developed at the time of favorable condition of a xylem, and simultaneously at that time only one single phloem secondary cell are developed. Means what? Sometimes there is a extremely stressful years or situation, and within that situation phloem is less affected, and that's why the ratio may drop below 1. So in most cases the phloem operates in food transport. So first of all, the phloem is a living cells which can always participate in a food transport, and xylem are the non-living cells or dead cells which always participate in a water and mineral conduction. So that's why in most cases phloem operates food transport for only a single year, and later on, while the xylem of most species may function in sap conduction of a several years before it loses functionality and becomes a hardwood. Means what? Loses functionality and becomes a hardwood means the xylem cells which are non-living in nature, beside that they can hold sap and transport water and minerals, but later on after a few years they loses their functionality and they becomes a died one and becomes a part of a hardwood. Then the tree annually produce more wood than it needs for the conduction. Means at the time of a growth the plants can develop many more cells rather than they needed for the conduction, and that's why whatever the much more amount of cells are developed, they are utilized for the support, and that is the mechanical support, while there is a wide margin of a safety in xylem production. So these xylems which are developed as compared to phloem much more in amount, they become a mechanical support. In contrast, there is a much smaller margin of a safety in phloem production. So that's why it has higher priority of allocation of the energy resources of the tree, because of they are conducting a food material. Then under extremely stressful condition, annual xylem production may be zero even while some phloem continues to be formed. Means In a stressful condition, annual xylem production may be zero, but the phloem can grow continuously. In case of a branching pattern, branching is a significant characteristic in trees. Most conifers form a well-defined dominant trunk with smaller lateral branches, while many angiosperms shows for some part of their development a well-defined central axis which then divides continually to form a crown of branches of similar dimensions, and in this way there is a development of a new axis. This can be found in many oak trees, honey leucast, then silver Indian, that is Tilia tomentosa, and the American elm, that is Ulmus americana. Then the palm illustrate the third major tree from columnar, in which the central axis which develops without branching until the apex of the pole. So come towards again growth ring. Growth ring in a cross section of the stem of a woody plant. The increment of wood added during a single growth period means growth period means a single season. Likewise summer, autumn, winter, as like this one. So that is a single growth period. In temperate regions, the growth period is usually 1 year, in which the growth ring may be called an annual ring. So within temperate regions there is a growth period that is only 1 year, and that's why there is a development of single annual ring, while in tropical regions growth rings may not be discriminable or not annual. Even in temperate regions growth rings are occasionally missing. So sometimes within a temperate region there is a single growth ring, it means a annual ring. So they are, if due to some reason they are not developed, so at that time they can miss a annual ring. Beside that, in case of a tropical regions, growth rings are ring may be deposited during single year, for example following insect defoliation. So what happened? Growth rings are distinct in conducting cell produce early in the growth period are larger, that is a spring or early wood, means that is a spring wood or early wood. Then those produce after the spring, these are called as a summer wood or late wood. Or if the growth is terminated by a layer of relatively thick walled fibers or by parenchyma. Sometimes in temperate or cold climates, the age of a tree may be determined by the counting the number of annual rings at the base of the trunk, or if the trunk is hollow, the base of the root. So annual rings have been used in dating ancient wooden structure, especially those of the American Indian in the dry southern regions of the United States. Fluctuations of ring width in a source of information about ancient climate. So due to the growth ring we can calculate age, we can determine ancient climate conditions, and we can also count whatever the fluctuations are happen at that time. So how we can calculate all these things, these are given in this diagram. So first of all, this complete diagram is a diagrammatic representation of a single plant So first of all, A is nothing but this annual first year plant, and here is the development of a first ring which is present at the center, not away from the center. So this is the first annual ring. Then B is the growth. B is the growth which is rapid, forming relatively broad even A rings. Later on, this is the C, which is the reaction of wood which is formed to help support the tree after something felt against it. Means this one is the C diagram which shows the new branches, development of a new branches. Then later on, D is the growth which is straight but crowded by other trees. Means many more trees which are developed around that tree, so that is the crowded due to the other trees. Then this E is nothing but competing trees are removed. Due to some reasons, the competing trees means competitors becomes removed and growth is again going to be rapid, means a faster growth. While in case of F, there is a presence of, there is a shown by this ring, that is the fire scars which are present at that time due to the firing in a forest. While G is nothing but narrow rings which are caused probably by a prolonged dry spell. Means here is the G which can represent a time period or a G year. At that time there is a drought resistance, and due to that there is a development of a such type of narrow rings. While this H patch shows narrow rings which may have been caused by a insect. So in this way growth rings are formed, and we can also determine how they are developed, and we are also find out what are the reasons behind that, that is as like due to the fire, due to the insect attack, due to the drought resistance, whatever different type of growth rings are found within a single tree. So such tree growing in areas with pronounced seasonal differences generally experience an awakening of the cambium at the beginning of the growing season, then to form the growth ring of wood and bark. While growth ring formation probably evolved late in the Paleozoic era in response to the seasonal changes in water ability, while tree height is closely associated with the quality of the site on which the tree is growing, that is climate, soil type, topography and biota. These all are the different type of condition. Then radial growth is tied more to the weather condition of the current year. So for this reason, the width of growth rings has been used to provide information on past climate as well as to date event of the past year. Then Dendroclimatology and Dendrochronology are names which given to this field of studies. Historically, growth rings, also called growth increments, were called as annual rings. More understanding of seasonal wood formation now recognize that many trees, particularly in tropics and subtropics, form rings not on an annual basis but rather in response to various cyclic environmental conditions. So sometimes some annual rings going to be missed, and they given such condition is due to the a typical environmental response. Growth rings are visible because of the differences in cell types, then characteristics, arrangement in between these cycles within a growth ring. Those cells responsible for the conduction of water rapidly become devoid of cell content because they must be empty and dead at a functional maturity. Functional maturity means what? At the end of the year. The hollow center of the cell is called as a lumen. So the heartwood may be divided into ring porous and diffuse porous. Ring porous means a continuous ring, and diffuse porous means a diffuse small groups of porous rings. In ring porous trees, the vessel laid down at the beginning of the growing season are much larger than subsequent vessels laid down at the end of the season or a ring. So, diffuse porous trees form vessels of roughly the same radial diameter throughout the growing season. This is the difference in between ring porous and diffuse porous trees. Larger vessel size permits more rapid water conduction because the rate of conduction varies with the fourth power of the radius of the vessel lumen. Then most ring porous trees are found in the north temperate areas of the world. In a number of species, the vessel become occulted by cellular growth rings from surrounding living cells. The occultation called as a Tylose may occur in the first year after vessel formation. Then the protoplast of adjacent living cell proliferates through thin areas in the cell wall known as a pits. For example, red oak, which is Quercus rubra, does not have tyloses, whereas white oak, that is a Quercus alba, does. This is why white oak is used to make whiskey barrels, while red oak cannot be utilized for this purpose. So that is the main difference in between red oak and white oak. The width of the annual increment depend on soil quality. So means the width of an annual increment depend on a soil quality. It is in connection with a soil and water conduction. The date of initiation and cessation of a radial growth of the year, the rate of cell division and the rate of magnitude of a cell expansion. So the first of all rate, here is the calculated rate of a cell division, and then calculate rate and magnitude of the cell expansion or cell elongation or the expansion of a vessel lumen or a central cavity. Radial diameters of a cell in the axial system are generally larger in spring because water trace is low and hormone production is high. That's why radial diameters of cells are more in size. The thickest walled cell generally mark the end of the growth ring. This often results in a sharp disjunction in between growth rings, and as the next cell formed will be a large diameter thin walled cell that mark initiation of the next year early wood. Means large diameter cells are developed at the end of the first season, while the small diameter cells are developed at early wood. These terms are nothing but an spring wood and summer wood and are no longer commonly used because it is now known that in many locations most of the so-called summer wood is actually formed in springs. So here is the diagram which can shows late wood and early wood. So at the base, here is the late wood which is darker in color, which is crowded and showing a small diameter, while this patch is a resin canal. This is the resin canal and this patch is nothing but an early wood which shows larger diameter of the vessels. And these are the medullary rays. In preformer species, tree that can contain all the next year needles in their winter buds, cambial activity begins about the same time as shoot growth, but generally continues for some time after shoot growth. Shoot growth means axillary buds growth, which ceases for the years. Then neoformers, trees that do not perform all the next year leaves in their winter buds. Leaf formation may continue for some time after diameter growth ceases, means diameter of the bark or main tree trunk is completely grow, and later on there is a leaf formation. Under adverse condition, variation are observed. Incomplete discontinuous rings are developed. Rings are also going to be missed, means no wood formed in a particular given year. Sometimes there is a development of a false ring, that is a eccentric rings. Sometimes that rings going to be overproduction on one side, and fluted rings, that is overproduction at various sides around the circumference of the ring. This is all due to the some abnormal activities as like fire, insect attack, drought resistance. Many more conditions are responsible for such type of rings arrangement, that is discontinuous, false, eccentric, overproduction. in a given tree, within a given year, any combination of this variation may be seen from crown to the base. Crown means at the top, from top to the base. The normal condition, especially in trees of temperate regions, is the development of a single ring during each growing season. Other rings formed during the season are called false ring. False rings phenomena is clearly evidenced in conifers when the normal growing season is interrupted by factors such as drought in the spring. Means whatever the temperate region are there, but water is not available for the growth purpose, so that's why there is a development of a false ring. As condition worsen, the radial diameter of the secondary tissue cells decrease and the walls may thicken and the wood may take on the appearance of a late wood. So this is again a different condition. Once the drought condition have passed, the radial diameters of the cells of the secondary tissue will increase, creating the appearance of a new annual rings. This, however, is a false ring because there is a gradient in increasing cell wall thickenings and decreasing cell diameter at the start of the false ring, and another gradient of decreasing cell wall thickenings and increasing cell diameter at the end of the false ring. False rings are a challenge to dendroclimatology, but they also offer opportunity to trace weather patterns over long periods of times. This information on past climates encoded not only in the number of cells in an annual ring but also in the thickness and composition of the cell wall and in the lumen diameters. Complication in reading this information arise because of growth increment produced by a given tree in given year may be of unequal width at different points around the different heights. Classical growth rings are found in conifers and ring porous hardwood, where the delineation of growth ring is clear. In diffuse porous temperate hardwood and ring-bearing tropical trees, variation in the cell in response to the developmental, seasonal and chronological time may obscure the limits of the tree rings. So this is all about the different characteristics of a growth ring and which type of wood is developed due to that is a sapwood heartwood. I hope you are getting complete idea about growth rings, sapwood, heartwood, and there are different types of rings, that is you will get a complete idea about that.